I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring Gang, a Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola. I'm Jim Chapman, and I am back with another 50 Shades of Evil series episode. And this time we are going to go to Colorado when on June 12th of 2012, a 24-year-old male by the name of James Holmes entered a midnight movie screening of Batman: The Dark Knight. And he was armed with an AR-15, a 100-round magazine, as well as a 12-gauge shotgun and a Glock 40 caliber pistol. He killed 12 people, injured 70 others, and when you talk about evil, this guy embodies it. So today we are going to talk about what led up to this shooting, what became of James Holmes, and we're going to go to the state of Colorado to do it and tell you the story of the Colorado theater shooter. And for James Holmes, it all started in 1987, but it was not in Colorado. It was in San Diego, California, where he was born to parents Robert and Arlene Holmes. And look, his parents were very smart, educated professionals. His dad was a mathematician and his mom was a registered nurse. And they were super smart people, very affluent. And although he was born in San Diego, he was actually raised until the age of 12, about 7 hours north of there in what's known as Casterville, California. However, at the age of 12, that family moves back to San Diego. And by this time, James had a younger sister who was 2 years younger than himself. Now, up to this point, he appeared to have a pretty normal childhood. His family took vacations. They had fun together, but it was not completely without its challenges. When James was just 8 years old, his parents sent him to a psychiatrist because he had hit his sister. Now, it could have been one of those sibling rivalry things that maybe his parents overreacted, or maybe they knew something was a little bit off with James. But outside of that, everything up until this point appeared typical, though he was a very shy kid when he was very young. Now, one thing that was apparent was that he was smart, gifted even. So James and his family, they moved back to the San Diego area, and James took this pretty hard. Felt like he was leaving his friends, and he was so upset about this, in fact, that on that 7-hour drive back to San Diego, he attempts to cut his own wrist with a piece of cardboard, which really, it was no big deal, just barely broke the skin. And his parents kind of looked at this as possibly some sort of reaction to that move and something to seek a little bit of attention. But this is the time frame where James would say later, after his arrest to a psychiatrist, that he felt he was starting to become mentally ill. Now, by the time he was a teenager, his parents, they tried to get him help. They were good people. They went to several different places to see psychiatrists. But the issue with James was, although it just appeared something wasn't right, it wasn't the warning signs that you would see where you would say, oh my gosh, this guy needs help right now. Just not huge things that would stand out. He just seemed kind of disconnected, if you will, from the rest of his family. Now, despite all this, he had a pretty typical social life. He had a few friends. He played soccer. He ran cross country. And in 2006, he would graduate from high school with honors. Now, although he would say he was never bullied during his high school years, he would say later that he would overhear people talking about him from time to time, and that they would say he was strange and just different. He said when this would happen, he would picture violent images in his head. When he was asked about this, he said images like a saw going through whoever happened to be saying these things about him. Now that, I would say, is quite the warning sign, right? But he would keep that to himself. So as I said, he graduates from high school with honors. He attends the University of California at Riverside, and he graduates from the University of California at Riverside in 2010 with a 3.96 GPA in neuroscience. Now, he would say later that he chose neuroscience because he knew that he had something wrong mentally and that he wanted to learn how to fix his brain. Now, after college, he toiled around with a few odd jobs and then decided he wanted to go back to college to pursue a PhD in neuroscience. And it was also at this point in time that people he would work with at these odd jobs, he had worked at like a factory at one point and some other places. They said he was very antisocial. He would stay to himself a lot of the times, and this would gradually get worse and worse for James as we go along. So James applied to several schools to seek this PhD, and he ends up picking Aurora, Colorado, and the University of Colorado in which to get his PhD. And he would actually get a girlfriend during this time. Now, although they would eventually break up because she would say she didn't want to have a long-term relationship. And although he didn't verbalize the fact that this crushed him at the time, it crushed him, and his mental state was going down at this point. So it was a blow that he didn't know how to deal with or didn't have the tools to deal with at that time. Now, they did continue to see each other, and I guess you could describe it as maybe some kind of hookup relationship, but they were not boyfriend and girlfriend. And he had said later on in interviews that he was absolutely in love with this girl. Now, it was during this time that also his anxiety would get really bad around almost everyone. So bad, in fact, that while he was in school, he would go see a psychiatrist himself. Now, she takes this appointment with James, and they have a couple of sessions together, and she picks up that there was a lot messed up underneath the surface with this kid. So much so that she reaches out to a colleague because she started to think this is beyond how I can help him. So she emails this colleague, and I'm going to read you that quick email. This is from psychiatrist Margaret Roth to psychiatrist Lynn Fenton, and it was emailed March 19th of 2012. She said, I saw a student late Friday who I would hope you would be able to see as soon as possible. He is the most anxious guy I have seen and has symptoms of OCD, but most concerning is that he has thoughts of killing people, though I do not think he is dangerous. He said he did not want to tell me everything he was experiencing as I might have to report him. The reason I think might be best for you to see him as I think it might be best to keep him in our system, and she means in the school system. What do you think about that? I am leaving right now to go get some work done on my car. Should be back about noon or 12:30. Thanks, Margaret. So that was the email. And obviously these issues are really surfacing to where James, not that he was attempting to hide them from other people, but he was certainly attempting to hide them from the public. He didn't hide them from a psychiatrist. So now Dr. Lynn Fenton, she does agree to work with James. And this is in late March of 2012. And throughout these sessions, he would mention that he's having or was having homicidal thoughts. And he would say these homicidal thoughts increased to about 3 or 4 per day. He would start to express hatred for people. And the doctor would note that he was having increased psychotic thinking levels. She would prescribe Zoloft and clonazepam for him. And what the doctor did not know during these sessions is that toward the end of their sessions, James started purchasing firearms. On May 22nd of 2012, he actually purchased his first weapon, a Glock pistol. A week later, on May 28th, a shotgun. He was already planning something, but he wouldn't disclose that to his psychiatrist. Now, just prior to his last session, on June 7th of 2012, he purchases an AR-15 rifle, 6,000 rounds of ammo, a drum magazine, and this drum magazine would increase the round capacity of that rifle from 30 rounds in the regular magazine to 100 rounds. So it was on June 11th that Holmes goes in for a session and he tells Dr. Fenton that he failed a major oral exam and he quit school on the spot. And not only that, he also said he was quitting his therapy. And she was like, why? And he said that he had lost his student status, which also means that he would lose his insurance due to not being a student anymore. So when you're on your parents' insurance, you have to be a student in college when you were the age of James Holmes. Well, if he drops out of school, then he's not going to be covered under that policy. And he said he could not afford the $400 monthly fee that she would be charging him. Now, Dr. Fenton, she was very concerned about this. Obviously, she sensed a lot wrong with this kid, and she offered him free sessions. Hey, we're not going to charge you anything. But he declined those free sessions. And it's at this point you could kind of tell that he was not jihad, if you will, with Dr. Fenton. So on this day, they did have one final session. And James was described by the doctor as very belligerent during this session. The session was very short and it was very tense. And he walks out of Dr. Fenton's office that day and he never returned. Shortly after, she said that he sent her threatening messages. And Dr. Fenton would be so concerned about this, she would actually contact James's mother out of concern for him leaving therapy, as well as campus police. Now, in his mother's case, his mother would testify at the trial and say, the doctor never mentioned to me, meaning Dr. Fenton, that James had threatened or had mentioned that he had these thoughts of killing other people. She said, had Dr. Fenton mentioned this, I would have done everything I could to pick him up that day. But the doctor never told her that. The only thing she mentioned that I was able to locate was that he was quitting his therapy and she was concerned about it. But she did contact campus police as well, the doctor, Dr. Fenton, and they deactivated his student ID card. So he had one of those student ID cards where you could swipe in and out of buildings. And Dr. Fenton was concerned he was going to come do something to her, so they deactivated his ability to be able to get into buildings. They also ran his criminal record, but the issue was James Holmes didn't have any criminal record. So once they did that, they just kind of put the file to the side. They figured, hey, this kid dropped out of school. It's not really our problem. We're campus police. And that was where that stopped. Now, when Dr. Fenton took the stand in the trial for this case, she did testify that she did not alert James's mother nor the police that he had made threats or exhibited any desires to kill anyone, even though he told her he had this secret desire to kill people. She testified in court it was due to his lack of revealing any specific plan or intent. I don't know. Intent, when you tell somebody you've had these thoughts, that's kind of intent to me. But I guess what she was saying was he didn't sit down with her and say, okay, I plan to go to a movie theater, for example.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. Now, because we are on the subject of Dr. Fenton, I want to go ahead and mention this. The day before this twisted individual decided he wanted to go kill a bunch of innocent people, James Holmes mails an entire notebook, a manifesto, if you will, to the attention of Dr. Fenton. Now, inside of this notebook, which was 56 pages, it was front and back, so it was 23 pages, both written front and back. Every plan you could imagine in what I'm going to tell you about that occurred later on. What did this notebook contain? Well, I'll cover some of the ramblings, if you will, that were inside of this notebook. There were some philosophical ramblings. So basically, this notebook opens with big handwritten questions that read like a tormented philosophy student, if you will, a journal of some sort. Things like, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of death? Can a person have both no value and be ultimately good and or ultimately evil in value? These were questions that were written. Inside this notebook, he had wrote the word why 247 times across 8 pages. Just the word why. He also had some pretty cryptic lines in there, including the mind is a prison of uncertainty. He had another one that said to all problems, death, multiplying both sides of an equation by 0 when mankind can't find truth. Untruth is converted to truth via violence. I mean, just some weird shit. Another one said the reason why life should exist is as arbitrary as the reason why it shouldn't. Life shouldn't exist. And these sections of the notebook were filled with like stick figure doodles, symbols. They had fragmented sentences. They were just very bizarre scribblings all over these pages. Now, a prominent section of that notebook was labeled Self-Diagnosis of a Broken Mind, and Holmes lists possible conditions that he had kind of self-diagnosed himself with, including schizophrenia, adjustment disorder, restless leg syndrome, and other vague entries that he had in there. He wrote in length about trying to rehabilitate the broken mind through neuroscience, but he said he concluded his soul must be eviscerated to fix it. He described a decade-long obsession to kill and a long-standing hatred of mankind. He called people sheeple, and he also listed alternatives to death, and he put, ignore the problem. He talked about the obsession to kill, and he said he considered nuclear or biological bombs, serial killings, and other mass murder casualty methods before checking mass murder / spree as the winner, if you will, the one that he had chose to do. He had a notation that said maximum casualties, easily performed with firearms, although primitive in nature, no fear of consequences, being caught is 99% certain. Then under that, he had venue options, airport. And then he had notes underneath that said substantial security, too much of a terrorist history. Terrorism isn't the message. The message is there is no message. Then he had national forest, and he put rejected, too personal and yields too few kills. And then lastly, he had movie theater, which is obviously what he chose. And he put, what better place to case than that of an inconspicuous entertainment facility? Then underneath that, it said case the place. And he was in this section detailing all this research he did on what he was going to commit. And it said south side of Theater Optimal, 15 screens. Theater 10 and 12 were circled as best targets in complex. And then he marked the best parking spot for his car. He had victim clustering notes in there saying many initial persons packed into a single area. He even had mapped out an escape route. He had even put in the response time estimated by police, which he had 3 minutes as the estimated response time. He would have stick figure victims drew in this notebook. He had theaters with stars, and he would have notes like too many exits. He would have notes like reminders to practice shooting at the range, and he even listed the weapons and the ammunition that he had already acquired. So it goes without saying that at this point, James Holmes is completely off the rails. And on July 19th of 2012, he makes his final preparations. He photographed his ballistic gear, if you will, including a gas mask, 2 tear gas canisters, a bulletproof vest, a shotgun, an AR-15, a Glock pistol, as well as a ton of ammo. He lays all this stuff out on his bed and he takes a picture as if he were freaking proud of what he was about to do and he wanted to memorialize this moment. This was at 5:17 that day. At 6:22 p.m., he takes a selfie. And at this point, he had dyed his hair orange and he had twisted the front of his hair to look like 2 horns coming out of his head, satanic style, right? He then goes about the task of wiring his apartment, Home Alone style, but with real weapons. I'm talking tripwires that would set off homemade bombs, etc. Just prior to walking out the door, he does one more thing. He sets his computer to blast techno music 30 minutes after he leaves the house. Now, this is designed by plan in the mind of James Holmes. He actually wanted to lure police to his apartment, and all those explosives that he had set inside would go off as soon as they walked in the door. And then at 11:30 p.m., James Holmes arrives at the Century 16 movie theater. Now, he had 3 tickets to Batman The Dark Knight Rises, and it was showing in 2 theaters. Most popular movie of the summer, and this was like opening night for it. And the theaters it was showing in were Theater 8 and Theater 9. Now, he had done a ton of research on these 2 particular theaters, and in the end, he chose Theater 9 due to the ability to handcuff one side of the double doors shut. However, the tickets to Theater 9 were sold out. He tried 3 times to get Theater 9 tickets, and he kept getting Theater 8, thus the 3 tickets. And I want to explain that real quick. He was buying these tickets online, and it wouldn't let you choose the theater. It was such a popular movie, and this was 2012. It's not today. So you could choose tickets, but it would just automatically give you what's available. And because Theater 9 was sold out, he just couldn't get tickets. He tried 3 times. So at 11:55, he goes inside of that theater, and at 12:03 a.m., he's captured by surveillance cameras walking past concessions into Theater 9. And the way he explained this later on was even though he had tickets to Theater 8, the concession stand was actually located on Theater 9's side. So he just went there and mingled around that concession stand for a minute. And then he went into Theater 9 because they only checked your tickets at the front of the entire complex, not when you get inside. So as he goes in Theater 9, he spots an empty seat on the front row and he sits down for a few minutes and the previews start. And as they're playing, he gets up out of his seats. Now, witnesses would say later that he appeared like he was taking a phone call. Now, we now know that this is fake. that he made this up. He just kind of picked up his phone, put it up to his ear as if he was getting a call, and started pacing out of the theater. It's part of the plan. He then goes to the left side of the theater where it's like a cubby. No one else can see you. And I want you to picture this. One side of that hallway, that cubby, led to the lobby of the theater, and the other side is an emergency exit. And he goes out of that emergency exit, and right in front of it, because he had planned all this out, his car is parked. So as he's walking out that door, he props it open just slightly with a tablecloth holder. And that was obviously so it would not shut and lock behind him. Now, this is about 20 minutes into the movie. Upon entering his car, Holmes started changing into that ballistic gear that he had photographed on that bed, right? A helmet, a gas mask, bulletproof vest, even bulletproof growing guards and leggings. He armed himself with all three guns, the AR-15, the shotgun, and the pistol. Now, about midway through changing in his cramped car, two employees actually walk right by him to throw some trash out. But James Holmes was well concealed. He had dark tinted windows for his vehicle, and he had taken a sunshade and he had placed that across the front windshield, even though it was after midnight. And he would say later to his psychiatrist that had they saw him, he would have killed them. And he actually had his pistol trained on them the entire time they were out there. Now, once they went back inside, he completed putting on his gear. And he did one final thing before he exited that car. He actually dials and he calls a crisis hotline. Now, James would say later he called in the hopes someone could talk him out of what he was about to do. He claimed no one answered, that he never heard anything. He held the phone to his ear for 9 seconds and then just hung up. However, records indicate someone did answer and that he hung up on that person. At that point, he places in his earbuds and he turns up techno music full blast and he exits his vehicle. Now, as soon as he steps out, he drops one of the two tear gas canisters he had. Now, at this point, he's geared up to the max. He can barely see due to the gas mask he had on, and it actually had scratches on it, so it really affected his vision. So he kind of panics for a second. He hurriedly looks around for this rolling tear gas canister of all things, but he can't find it. He then proceeds back to the emergency exit that he went out of, and there's a little corner there where nobody can see you, and he kind of stands there for about 30 seconds, almost like he was debating, do I really want to do this or not? Well, he decides to do it, and at 12:38 a.m., he re-enters that building through the emergency exit into the theater. Now, as soon as he steps back in that theater, he throws the tear gas canister that he didn't lose into the crowd. And this place is freaking packed to the gills. Every seat is taken in this 400-seat theater by this point. Now, many people saw this canister flying over the crowd and it had smoke coming out of it at that point, but they assumed this was some sort of teenage prank. I mean, you got this guy standing there, he's geared up as if he's going to war, and he's got orange hair and he throws something in the air with smoke coming behind it. I don't think anyone would automatically assume it was as serious as it actually was. They assumed it was like fireworks or a smoke bomb of some sort. But that thought left everyone's mind in there within just a few seconds when Holmes opens fire with that shotgun. He fires off all 6 shells that were loaded in that shotgun in rapid succession. Then, as quickly as you could think, he switches to that AR-15, which was loaded with 100 rounds, and he quickly fires off 60 5 rounds before the gun suddenly jams. Now, during this time, it is absolute chaos in that theater. People are screaming. They're trampling over one another, trying to run. Someone at some point trips a fire alarm, and with the AR-15 jammed, Holmes calmly retreats to the right side of that theater hallway that leads out to the theater, where he is just out of the line of sight of those inside. And at this point, a family of 3, they see this as an opportunity. They think maybe he left, and they wanted to get the hell out of there. So they make a run for it, thinking that Holmes went out the emergency exit, and they turn in the hallway to go run to the theater lobby, and they run right into James Holmes. Now, at this point, he's working on that AR-15, trying to get it unjammed, but he has his .40 caliber pistol in his hand, and he fires off 3 shots, hitting all 3 people. They are all shot, but they managed to escape past him. Now, at this point, literally hundreds of calls are placed into 911. And initially, I was going to play a few of those calls for you. However, these are so disturbing, I just decided not to. If you want to hear them, a simple Google search will pull up some 911 calls and you can listen to them. But it was just too disturbing. I didn't want to put it out there. Now, the shooting itself only lasted 1 to 2 minutes. It was that quick. Police arrived just 90 seconds after the first 911 call. But in this short amount of time, the damage Holmes managed to inflict was staggering. He fired off 76 shots total from those 3 weapons. 12 people were killed, including a 6-year-old girl. Now, several of these people died while shielding other people from the bullets. 70 people were injured. 58 of those were injured as a result of direct gunfire. Another 12 were injured as a result of the tear gas or being trampled on out of that theater. Now, after the shooting stopped, James Holmes simply strolled back out of that emergency exit where 2 police officers walked right by him. They assumed he was police due to being geared up in all this ballistics gear. He walks to his car, he lays his weapons inside, and he raises his arms in a surrender position in the air. Police took note of this, realized this is the fucking guy, and they place him into custody. Now, once in custody, shockingly, and thank God, he did tell police his apartment was wired with explosives, which, due to the use of robots and some other means, it took police over 24 hours to even make entry into his apartment. They also found in his car tire tacks to pop tires, as well as a first aid kit alerting police that he had planned on a police chase and he was going to toss those tire tacks out. And he had a first aid kit. I guess if he got in a wreck or something, he could doctor himself back up. So they bring him into the interrogation room and they bag his hands. And the reason that they do this is to secure any GSR residue, gunshot residue that he may have on his hands. And you can tell during this point, the cops, they were doing everything they could not to kill this guy, and understandably so. I mean, you can tell they got a ton of disdain for this clown as they are bagging his hands. So this punk is sitting there with these bags on his hands, and what do you think he's doing? He starts doing hand puppets back and forth with the bags. Talk about someone that doesn't realize the evil of what he just did. Now, they did attempt to interrogate him. However, as soon as they read him his rights in the interrogation room, he invokes his right to remain silent. He basically said, I want an attorney. and I want a court-appointed attorney. He requests a lawyer. And at that point, you got to stop questioning, or whatever he says is inadmissible in court. So police stopped him. He got his lawyer. Eventually, this goes to trial. And in the end, he is found guilty, and he is sentenced to 12 life sentences plus 3,318 years in prison. And it wrapped up quickly for a case of this size. That was in 2012 that he actually got convicted. Now, in that trial, key evidence, just a quick synopsis of that. They had survivor testimony. They had videos. They had that notebook that I told you about. Obviously, a ton of psychiatric exam evidence. And you may wonder, why no death penalty in this case? And according to juror statements after the trial, they failed to unanimously agree on the death penalty due to his documented mental illness. Whether you agree with that or not, that was the case there and why he didn't get the death penalty. Now, after his trial, he's in jail forever, right? He's initially held in Colorado's state facilities. And in 2015, he gets assaulted by another inmate. And so at that point, they move him. They transfer him to federal custody. And he gets housed at USP, United States Prison Allenwood in Pennsylvania. And he was housed in what's known as protective isolation due to his obvious notoriety. Look, people will get major points if they kill that guy, other prisoners. So that's why he's housed there. He spends 23 hours per day confined to his cell. He has no contact with other inmates. And rumor has it, he has refused any sort of visits, even from his own family. And you know what? It's my opinion that he deserves every single thing that he has gotten. This is one of the most horrific individuals that I have covered yet. And he deserves every bit of sitting in that cell 23 hours a day, in my opinion. Of course, families were affected by this. Over, hundreds of thousands. The whole community of Colorado was affected by this horrific shooting. My thoughts, prayers, hearts go out to all of the victims, all of the victims' family, friends, and everybody in the Colorado community that was affected. What a horrific, fucking senseless tragedy taking place in 2012 in Colorado. But there you have it. That is 50 Shades of Evil, Colorado. I want to thank everybody for listening. Check out the Patreon for commercial-free early releases and more. Patreon.com/Bloody Angola Podcast. And this will be the last episode you hear before Easter. So I want to wish everyone out there a happy Easter with family and friends. And if you're in South Louisiana, we eat crawfish for Easter. So I'm looking forward to that. Until next time, for Bloody Angola, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang, or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wild.